In Daniel chapter 1, verses 8 through 21. But before we can dive into those verses, we need to cover what we covered last week, and that being verses 1 through 7. And it's strange, isn't it? I mean, you see God's working in that. In those verses that we covered last week, we see the prophet Isaiah's words coming true. Babylon has crushed the southern kingdom, has enslaved its people, and this happened during the third year of the reign of Jehoiakim, the king of Judah. And it was Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, who crushed Jerusalem. But we also learned last week that Nebuchadnezzar not only enslaved the people of Judah, but he also took some of the vessels of the house of God and placed them in his treasury in the land of Shinar of his false gods. So he takes God's people and he takes the Lord's vessels. But the vessels, you actually see the same thing playing out that happened with God's people. Here they were embracing these pagan rituals. They were worshiping these false idols. And then what does Nebuchadnezzar do? He takes the vessels of the true living God and places them amongst his false idols. But they're not going to remain there. The same way in which God's people will not remain enslaved in Babylon, the vessels of the Lord will not remain amongst those false gods. Now, it's going to take some time, but the promise has been made through the Lord by the prophet Isaiah that they will be freed. It's during this time, once Nebuchadnezzar comes in, crushes Babylon, enslaves the people, he instructs Ashpenaz, his chief, to select some people from the Israelites. And those people had to be from royalty and nobility. And from that group also, I want you to select, I'm just paraphrasing here, but some young, good-looking guys, wise, competent, who will serve in the king's palace. So if we have royalty, nobility, the young, the good-looking, the competent, the wise, if we can indoctrinate them, if we can pull them over to our culture, to our faith, to our beliefs, the rest will follow. Again, Satan is a one-trick pony. This is still happening today. But there's something interesting that Nebuchadnezzar does, and it's really quite brilliant. He's not going to place these that he's going to indoctrinate first in a ghetto or a concentration camp. No. He's going to bring them into the palace. He's going to feed them food from his table. He's going to give them wine from his table. I mean, it's going to be the best of the best. That's what they're going to be able to feed on. That's what they're going to be able to drink. And let's be honest, the education that they're going to receive, beyond like anything else, doesn't mean it's correct, but they're going to receive a stellar education. For 3 years, they're going to be educated, their beliefs, their culture. And we know that 4 of these young, wise, good-looking men, we know who they are. That being Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. But there's something else that they're going to do. They're going to remove their Hebrew names from them. Why? Because the Hebrew names have a meaning. We know that Daniel's Hebrew name is God is my judge. Hananiah, the meaning is the Lord is gracious. Mishael, who is what God is. Azariah means the Lord is a helper. What are they going to do? They're going to give them new names that reflect the Babylonian gods in which that culture serves. Remove God from their names and replace it with their false idols. We know that Daniel will now be called Belteshazzar. Hananiah will now be called Shadrach. Mishael will now be known as Meshach. And Azariah will now be called Abednego. And as we go throughout this book, we're going to read about these 4 young men. And how even though they're enslaved, they've been brought away into this pagan land, They still hold, they're still embracing the will of God and what He has for their lives. They're still trusting in the Lord. They served the Babylonian community, but they did not embrace the culture, the false gods, or anything that went against the true living God. They answered to their Babylonian names, but still maintained their Jewish names and faith. They didn't become their Babylonian name. In a way, the names symbolize the dual lives that they were having to live. And how are they going to be able to do this? Through faith and strength of relying upon the other believers around them. They knew that they could not preserve their heavenly identity on their own. Again, it has to come through faith and community. They found comfort and strength in one another. Do you understand why the church is so important today? There's a reason why we have been called to fellowship with one another. Christianity is not a lone wolf sport, church. But we see this in the time of Daniel, and it still rings true today. Babylon was going to do everything in its power to mold these 4 young men into what they believe. Strip them of their understanding of the true living God. However, they found courage in one another to stay strong in their faith. Again, this is the reason why that we have been called to walk through the Word with one another, to praise His name with our brothers and sisters, to pray with our brothers and sisters as a corporate family. There's strength and comfort in fellowship, church. Because we too are living in 2 kingdoms. Right now, we're living in this fallen earthly realm, but our citizenship at the same time is in the heavenly realm and new earth. It's through their faith and reliance upon one another that they will not embrace the Babylonian culture that goes against the Lord, and the same goes for us today. All right, let's look at verse 8. So here the food has been offered to them. Meat from the king's table and wine from the king's table. The purest of pure. But Daniel resolved that he would not defile himself with the king's food or with the wine that he drank. Therefore, he asked the chief of the eunuchs to allow him not to defile himself. Now, the question you may be asking is, why deny the food? Why deny the drink? Did it have something to do with their kosher laws? Were they concerned about the food not being prepared according to their dietary laws? I'm going to say I don't believe so. The reason why I say that is because in Daniel 10:3, what do we see? He states that he went 3 weeks without eating meat and wine or any delicacy. So eventually there is a point in time where he does start to consume the meat and drink the wine, but not yet. Well then, could it be that they were concerned about the meat and wine being sacrificially offered before the Babylonian gods? Again, it could be, but if that were the case, what about the vegetables? Would not all food be sacrificially offered before the pagan gods? And they ate the vegetables. So why avoid the food? Maybe 2 reasons. Maybe one, in the beginning, this was going to help Daniel and his 3 friends to avoid the temptation of the Babylonian culture. So they chose this as a way to remain pure to the faith. a way to remind themselves that they were Jewish exiles in a foreign land and that they were only going to serve the true living God. Here's the second reason to deny the king's food. Now, we're going to have to go back, and we talked about this last week. It was King Hezekiah who was king of Judah, and you remember what God told King Hezekiah? To rely upon him for protection. What does King Hezekiah do? And this is well before Daniel. I said Daniel, right? Not David. Well before Daniel, King Hezekiah meets with some Babylonian representatives. And what does he do? He takes them to the treasury. Look at all this wealth that we have. What's he hinting at? Could we do something for you guys so that you all would protect us? What King Hezekiah was saying was, I know that God has promised us protection, but we're still going to rely upon Babylon. What Daniel and his three friends are saying here is they don't want to make the same mistake that King Hezekiah made. They're going to rely upon God, not the king. They're going to rely upon God. Give us what grows from the earth and that which falls from the sky, O Lord. We'll rely upon you to sustain us, not the king's table. But look at how Daniel goes about doing this. Does he go on a hunger strike? Does he start demanding vegetables and water only? No. He asked for permission from the chief eunuch. Again, no protest, no scene. Look at verse 9. And God gave Daniel favor and compassion in the sight of the chief of the eunuchs. The chief eunuch liked Daniel. That's a good sign, right? What are we seeing here? You see the Lord working in the heart of that chief eunuch. Did that chief eunuch have an option of whether or not he was going to like Daniel? No. Here the Lord is making it clear, you're going to like this guy. You're going to find favor in Daniel. Now, again, these verses aren't only about these four young men's faithfulness to the Lord. It's also about God's faithfulness to them. None of this happens without God. You think Daniel is going to find favor in that chief eunuch without God's hand being upon that eunuch? No. And we may even ask this question as well. Maybe you don't ask a lot of questions. Maybe I should phrase that differently. But here, Daniel was probably around the age of 15. Tell me, how many 15-year-olds do you know? I'm going to offer you the finest steak you're ever going to consume and the most lovely glass of wine you have ever tasted. What do you think that's going to be like? Why over food? Why over something so small? But that's the point, church. It's over something small that Daniel is convicted over. It's not anything that's large or big or massive. It's over something small that Daniel's like, I can't do this. Even the small things, I'm going to rely upon the Lord. And I can guarantee you, those who are surrounding Daniel and his three friends are like, you guys are idiots. Why are you making such a big deal about this? Just eat the steak, man. Drink the wine. Again, Daniel trusting in the Lord, even with the small things. Now look at verse 10. And the chief of the eunuchs, who likes Daniel, said to him, I fear my lord the king, who assigned your food and your drink. For why should he see that you were in worse condition than the youths who are of your own age, so you would endanger my head with the king? So we're seeing that it doesn't seem as if he's down with this, right? He doesn't say no. It's close, but he doesn't say no. And it should be something he's worried about. If they're all eating the same food, you would expect similar results. Chief eunuch is sitting here thinking, if they stand before the Lord, but these four are looking malnourished, if they're looking sickly, he's going to ask me what is going on. This young man, by the name of Daniel, cannot let this go. He will not let this go because of his conviction. He's not going to rely on the food of Nebuchadnezzar, but the food from God. Now, once again, do you think this is easy? Because the others around him, like we just said, they're going to be like, man, what's wrong with you? But look at how something small starts out, right? First, they start eating the food. Then they start embracing their Babylonian names and what that means. Then they forget about the land in which God has given them, the land in which they were stolen from. And it slowly trickles down to that land is far away. My name is no longer my name. I don't even know where my true living God is. It starts small. And they're 900 miles from home, separated from their family. Who's going to know? And if they all start doing it together, then what's it matter? Daniel, at such a young age, understood the Lord. And understood that no matter the trials and tribulations, I mean, they're slaves. So that's a pretty big trial. That's a tribulation that, for the most part, none of us are going to face. And yet at 15 years old, I'm going to rely upon the Lord. Not only is Daniel going to appear odd to Babylon for not taking part in this meal, but also his own kinsmen. Now, before we press on, if you think the message behind this book is be more like Daniel, and everything is going to go well for you, let's just make it perfectly clear. None of us are like Daniel. More than likely, we would be the nameless Israelites in the background saying, give me more steak. Can I have another glass of wine, please, and thank you? The moment that we start focusing on Daniel is the moment that we overlook what our Savior has done. So stop saying, I'm going to be more like Daniel. You're not. There's already been a Daniel, and there's a story about him right here. And it's not about you. If you want to heap conviction upon yourself, if you want to be crushed by works, keep comparing yourself to Daniel for the assurance of your salvation and see where that gets you. It will break you. I guess what I'm saying is, don't let your salvation rest in how much you're like Daniel. And that's what's so wonderful about what Christ has done. He's rescued those who will never be like Daniel. He's rescued the faithless and the compromised. Again, thankfully, our salvation doesn't rely upon the world tempting us and even consuming us at times. That's not an excuse, it's just the reality. Our salvation rests in the Savior who wasn't tempted nor consumed by the world. Our salvation rests in the perfect sinless one Daniel is foreshadowing. Okay, back to Daniel. Back to Daniel. Look at verse 11. I'm going to throw 11 and 12 together here, okay? Then Daniel said to the steward, okay, so he's going underneath the guy. It's underneath the chief eunuch, okay? More than likely, the steward is going to be the man who's going to oversee these four young men, who's going to take care of them. This is who Daniel goes to. The chief of the eunuchs had assigned over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Go to verse 12. here's Daniel asking a favor. Test your servants for 10 days. Let us be given vegetables to eat and water to drink. Again, Daniel really wasn't getting it where with the chief eunuch, so he goes to the understudy. He asks him the same thing. Just give us the 10 days. If we're not looking good after 10 days, we'll do whatever you want us to do, okay? But just promise me 10. Do you see the faith that the Lord has given Daniel? I bet this kid wouldn't shut up the whole time. I bet it was like, just eat. No, I can't eat it. The chief eunuch is, please eat it. And then he's like, no, I'll go to your underling, okay? I'll start talking to him. Look at verse 13. Then let our appearance and the appearance of the youths who eat the king's food be observed by you, and deal with your servants according to what you see. Just give us the eye test. That's all I'm asking for. And once again, we're going to see the Lord work. Look at verse 14. So the steward listens to them in this matter and tested them for 10 days. How did the steward come to this decision? The Lord working on this pagan. The Lord convicting this pagan to give Daniel 10 days. Again, we have to pay close attention in how the Lord is working all throughout this. From the chief eunuch who finds favor in Daniel to the steward who is like, okay, if this kid ain't going to shut up about it, let's just try it. Now look at verse 15. At the end of 10 days, it was seen that they were in better appearance. Okay, here's the important part, okay? And fatter in flesh, all the youths who ate the king's food. Let's use science just for a moment, right? Because the Lord gave us science. This doesn't make any sense. The other who accepted the king's meal, they were getting protein, fat, and wine. More than likely, 3 meals a day, protein, which is fantastic, fat, which is very healthy for you, and in wine, in moderation, right? But 3 meals a day, that's what they are consuming. So you have this group over here, and then you have the 4 eating vegetables and water. Okay. If your caloric intake is less than what you are burning, is less than what you're burning throughout the day, you're going to lose weight. It's very difficult on vegetables and water to consume more than what your body burns, as opposed to steak, wine. If we were to judge the calories, speculating, lower calorie intake, higher calorie intake. But this side is fatter. This side is healthier looking. Science, help me here. I don't know. Now the steward has got to be asking himself, this doesn't make any sense. I'm not saying that he's a nutritionist, but common sense, this isn't making any sense. Now for you vegetarians out there, you're like, see, I told you. I think this is a miracle, not the norm. I can almost guarantee you that Daniel sat down with the steward and told him exactly what was going on. Again, you see the working of God in every step of the way here. Now, if I can just put on my discernment cap just for a moment here, forgive me for this, but brief pause. I know that most of you all are familiar with Rick Warren, who is the pastor of Saddleback Church, also known for his best-selling book, The Purpose-Driven Life. They were just recently kicked out of the SBC because they started ordaining female pastors. It took them long enough. But anyway, that being the SBC to remove them. But Rick also wrote a book called The Daniel Plan, 40 Days to a Healthier Life. Context, context, context. I mean, really think about it. Here Rick Warren is saying, I've got a plan for you that's going to make you healthier than other people if you focus on these food groups and that what Daniel was eating. Is the scripture not clear that they were fatter? I'm going to write a Starburst diet plan. I mean, really, contextually, how much sense does this make? What was Rick doing at this point in time when he had this idea, I'm going to write a book that's going to make people fatter? And yet, you know how many were sold? It was a bestseller. Again, it goes back to the ignorance of the church today. That's not what this is about. Anyway, back to it. Look at verse 16. So the steward took away their food and the wine they were to drink and gave them vegetables. He allowed them to continue on this diet. Doesn't make any sense, but they look better than everyone else. Why would I change that? Look at verse 17. As for these 4 youths, God gave them learning and skill in all literature and wisdom, and Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. I think this is something else that we cannot overlook. God gave them learning and skill in all literature and wisdom. Every single gift we have is from the Lord. Now, I don't care how much time and effort you put in to crafting that gift that has been given to you. Do you know that time and effort, that is also a gift given to you from the Lord? This is one of the reasons why I cannot understand, as believers, we have anything to boast in. What reason do we have to be arrogant? Whether it be our looks, our athletic ability, our smarts. What do we have to boast in? If we can't boast in our faith because it's been given to us, is it not the same thing with every quality that God has blessed you with? But I work hard for it. How are you able to even breathe? How are you even to work on it? That is a gift from God. All glory goes to Him in all things. Now, Daniel had an understanding in all visions and dreams. This would have been huge to King Nebuchadnezzar. For the Babylonians believed that the ones who were able to interpret visions and dreams were able to do so through the Babylonian gods. You see what's happening here. You claim it's through the Babylonian gods, but the one who is smarter than anyone you have ever come across, this comes through the true living God. You can almost see a play of going all the way back to what? Pharaoh. The 10 plagues. God crushing the 10 gods in which Pharaoh served. You're going to see the same thing in how he works through Daniel. Look at verse 18. At the end of the time, when the king had commanded that they should be brought in, the chief of the eunuchs brought them in before Nebuchadnezzar. 3 years has come to an end. And it was time for Daniel and his friends to be questioned. So here it is. What's going to take place here? Verse 19. And the king spoke with them, and among all of them, none was found like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Therefore they stood before the king. Through the gifts that God had bestowed upon them, the king was blown away. Now, go back to the very beginning of the 3 years when everyone else was looking at the weirdos because they weren't eating the steak and the wine. Is this not a testimony to the rest of their kinsmen surrounding them? Rely upon the Lord. They could have fallen in line and been just like everyone else, but then there would not be this testimony right here. And at some point, even the kinsmen are like, man, these guys are really smart. Where did this come from? And now we got Daniel over here. He's interpreting visions and dreams. What's that about? Maybe we should have ate the vegetables. And here's the thing. They're just around the age of 18 now. 18. Just able to vote, and yet they're standing before King, not during that time, but anyway, just able to vote, but here they are standing before King Nebuchadnezzar, and he's blown away by them. But it gets even better. Look at verse 20. And in every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king inquired of them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters that were in all his kingdom. He's got 4 little Elon Musk standing right before him. Christian Elon Musk. That's what we're dealing with. But we're also dealing with something else here. The magicians and the enchanters relied upon what? False gods. And if we're just going to be brutally honest, it's not false gods, it's demons. That's who they're relying upon. Does that mean that demons can tell the future? No, but they've been around for a very long time. They've been studying humans, so they are making very educated guesses on what's going to happen. Not to mention they can also do a little tempting and a little possessing on the unbelievers. So they can manipulate the scene. They were really unofficial sorcerers who dealt in black magic. So once again, we see the way of the world. We see the knowledge that is based upon the world. Not God, but the world. So he's got his smart little secular magicians over here. But then you have the truth in these 4. The knowledge and the understanding that comes from God. And it is 10 times better. Do you see what's being laid out before King Nebuchadnezzar? Here you have the gods of Babylon. And then you have the God of Israel. What's going on here? These 4, they will serve in the palace of the king, but they will never serve in the realm of the magicians and the enchanters. They did not participate in the world of black magic. For the very ones who rejected the king's food were not going to bow a knee to the demon's knowledge. Look at verse 21. And Daniel was there until the first year of King Cyrus. What's this pull us back to? Who was the pagan king from Persia who was going to rescue the southern kingdom in 70 years? This is the guy. The Persian king who crushes Babylon. The one who frees the Jewish people. And God preserved Daniel until that time. 70 years a faithful servant. It's a beautiful story. But you're not Daniel. But your faith is in the very one who also saved Daniel. All right, questions?